My wife, Jessica, and I had been together for nearly 12 years. We met in college, that classic love story everyone dreams of, two kids who fell hard and fast. We got married after graduation, and 3 beautiful kids later. I thought we had it all. Jessica, always put together, was the kind of person who could walk into a room and command attention. She was driven, worked hard, and after our 3rd baby, she somehow bounced back like it was nothing. Meanwhile, I was juggling work and being a dad, feeling proud of the family we'd built. But looking back, maybe I was blind. Our youngest, Jake, is only 6 months old. He's still so tiny, and honestly, I couldn't have been more thrilled when he was born. I had that overwhelming dad joy you get when you hold your baby for the first time. I was convinced that despite our ups and downs, Jessica and I had made it through. We were stronger for it. But then, a month ago, my world stopped. I found out something that shook me to my core. Something I'm still struggling to believe even as I'm telling you this now. Jessica had been cheating on me for 5 years. 5 years of lies, secrets, and betrayal. And it wasn't just anyone, it was with someone we both knew, her personal trainer. The worst part? Now, I don't even know if Jake is mine. I'll share how it all came to light in the next part. Trust me, it gets worse. You know how they say hindsight is 20/20. Looking back, there were signs. I just didn't want to see them. Jessica had always been into fitness. After each pregnancy, she'd jump right back into her workout routine like it was second nature. She hired a personal trainer, Ryan, to help her get into even better shape. He was this well-known trainer at the gym, a guy with the charm and looks to match. At first, I thought nothing of it. She was happy, confident, and I was proud of her for taking care of herself. I trusted her. But about a year ago, things started to feel off. Little changes that at the time seemed small but now scream at me in hindsight. She'd come home from the gym later than usual, sometimes without any real explanation. She was always on her phone, texting someone, claiming it was work-related or a friend from her mom group. And the way she started treating me? Almost like I was just part of the furniture. Distant. I told myself it was just the stress of having 3 kids. I mean, with a newborn in the house, things get tough, right? I'd even blamed myself, thinking maybe I wasn't doing enough to support her. But there were nights when she'd shower immediately after coming home, saying she was sweaty from the workout. I didn't think much of it then, but now. I can't stop thinking about every one of those moments. It wasn't until a month ago when I accidentally came across a text on her phone that everything started unraveling. That text would be the first domino to fall. And the messages weren't from a mom friend or work contact, they were from Ryan. The man I thought was just her trainer. What I saw made me sick. It was a Saturday afternoon when I found it. Jessica had gone out with friends, or so she said, and left her phone on the kitchen counter. I didn't plan on snooping, honestly, I had no reason to, at least not until that moment. But her phone kept lighting up with notifications, and out of habit, I glanced over. The name on the screen made my stomach drop, Ryan. I tried to brush it off at first. I mean, he was her trainer. They'd probably exchange messages about workouts, right? But something didn't feel right. Something in my gut told me I needed to check. So I did. That's when I saw the message. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. It was like a punch to the gut. My heart was pounding, and I could barely breathe. I scrolled up, half hoping it was all a misunderstanding. But the further I went, the worse it got. Flirty messages. Secret plans to meet. There were even pictures, nothing graphic, but enough to tell me everything I needed to know. They had been seeing each other for years. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. This wasn't just a fling. They had been involved for a long time, 5 years, based on what I could gather. That's when I realized that Jessica had been lying to me for nearly half of our marriage. 5 years of secrets. 5 years of betrayal. I didn't know how to react. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was all there, staring me in the face. And as if the knife couldn't twist any deeper, I suddenly thought about Jake, our 6-month-old. Was he even mine? I sat there, in shock, for what felt like hours. When Jessica came home later that day, she was her usual, smiling self. Completely unaware that her world, like mine, was about to fall apart. But I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. Not until I knew everything. After that day, everything changed. I felt like I was living in a fog, constantly playing detective in my own life. The truth about Jessica and Ryan consumed me, but I couldn't confront her yet. I needed more proof, something undeniable. Something that would explain why she had done this, why she had betrayed me for so long. For the next few days, I paid closer attention to everything. Her gym sessions, the way she acted around me, the way she was with the kids. It was like I was looking at her through a different lens, seeing all the little details that I'd missed before. I started noticing her phone habits more, how she'd flip her screen face down whenever I walked by, how she'd be glued to her texts, smiling at things I was never a part of. One evening, I made up an excuse about needing to work late and drove to the gym where she usually trained. I waited outside, parked across the street. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I felt like I had to do something. And then, I saw her walk out. But she wasn't alone. Ryan was with her. They weren't heading toward her car. Instead, they crossed the street, laughing, talking closely. Like two people without a care in the world. I followed them from a distance, my heart in my throat the entire time. They ended up at a restaurant. Just the two of them. I watched from across the street, my mind racing. How many times had they done this? How many lies had she told me while sneaking off with him? Seeing them together like that, it made it real. No more second-guessing, no more trying to explain things away. She was with him. The woman I'd shared my life with for over a decade was sharing parts of herself with someone else. When she got home that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked me about my day, and smiled like she hadn't just been out with him. I couldn't stand it. The lies, the deception, it was eating me alive. But I wasn't ready to blow it all up. Not yet. Because the next step. That would be the hardest. I needed to know if Jake was really mine. The idea that Jake might not be mine was something I couldn't shake. It haunted me every time I looked at him, this innocent baby boy, smiling up at me with those wide eyes, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. I wanted to believe he was mine, I needed to believe it. But after discovering Jessica's affair, especially knowing it had been going on for 5 years, I couldn't trust anything anymore. Not even our son. I kept replaying the timeline in my head. Jake was born 6 months ago, but how long had Ryan really been in the picture? And how close were they during her pregnancy? My mind was going to dark places, and I knew I couldn't live like this, with questions and doubts gnawing at me every second. I needed answers. So, I made the decision. I ordered a DNA test kit online, the kind where you don't need the mother's sample. Just mine and Jake's. It felt surreal, like something out of a nightmare. I mean, who tests their own child to see if he's theirs? But this was my life now. Nothing felt real anymore. The hardest part was actually doing the test. I waited until Jessica left the house one day. She had said she was going to a workout session at the gym. Classic. Once she was gone, I swabbed Jake's cheek, trying to keep my emotions in check. He giggled, oblivious to the weight of what I was doing. That innocent laughter almost broke me. I sent the kid off the next day, my hands shaking as I dropped it in the mailbox. Then came the waiting. Every day felt like an eternity, every moment spent wondering, fearing the worst. I barely slept. Jessica didn't notice my tension, she was too wrapped up in whatever lies she was living. Or maybe she was just that good at pretending. The test results were going to take a couple of weeks, and in that time, I knew I had to keep my composure. If I confronted her now, before I knew the truth, I risked everything falling apart without having the full picture. But God, it was hard. Every time I saw her, my blood boiled. Every time she held Jake, I felt a mix of love and fear. And every night, when she'd climb into bed next to me, pretending we were still the perfect family, I had to fight the urge to scream. Those weeks of waiting for the DNA results were absolute hell. I felt like I was living two different lives. On the outside, I had to keep pretending like everything was normal. I went to work, I took care of the kids, I even managed to smile when Jessica was around, though it felt like my face might crack under the pressure. But inside, I was a mess. Every minute that passed without those results felt like a ticking time bomb, and I had no idea what was going to happen when it finally went off. The hardest part was keeping it together for the kids. They were my whole world, and they didn't deserve any of this. Our two older ones, Emily and Lucas, were always asking me to play or help with schoolwork, and I did everything I could to be the dad they knew. But I'd catch myself zoning out, staring off into space, lost in my thoughts about the future. What if Jake wasn't mine? What if my whole family was built on a lie? Jessica was acting like everything was fine, which made it so much worse. I couldn't understand how she could carry on with her daily routine as if nothing had changed, as if she wasn't hiding a 5-year affair behind my back. She'd talk about plans for the weekend, or ask me what I thought about redecorating the living room. All I could do was nod along, my mind somewhere else entirely. I started noticing more things about her, too. The way she'd glance at her phone constantly, or how she'd get defensive if I asked her about her plans for the day. It was like she was living in two worlds, just like me, one where she was still the perfect wife and mother, and another where she was someone I didn't even recognize anymore. One evening, when the kids were asleep and Jessica was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. I'd never been the kind of guy to snoop before all this, but now I couldn't help myself. I went straight to her messages with Ryan. They weren't as flirty as before, but there was still something there, something just under the surface. Like they were trying to be more careful now. But it was clear that they were still in contact. Still seeing each other. My heart was pounding as I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I was shaking with anger, but I knew I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I had those DNA results. I needed all the facts before I tore our lives apart. The day the DNA results came in, I felt like my whole life had been leading to this moment. I had gotten the email notification while I was at work, and for a second, I just sat there, staring at my phone like it was some kind of weapon. I couldn't open it right away, I wasn't ready. My hands were sweating, my heart was pounding, and I felt sick to my stomach. But I couldn't wait forever. I locked myself in the bathroom at the office and finally clicked the email. The results were there, in black and white. Cold, clinical. And devastating. Jake wasn't mine. It was like the ground disappeared beneath me. The air was out of the room, and I just stood there, gripping the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize the guy looking back at me. I felt hollow, like a shell of myself. My son, no, the child I thought was my son, wasn't mine. The doubts, the fear, the sleepless nights, they were all justified. Ryan. It had to be Ryan. I don't even know how long I stood in that bathroom, numb, trying to figure out what to do next. But deep down, I knew there was only one thing left to do, confront Jessica. She had lied to me for years, she had let me believe that Jake was mine, that our family was whole. But now, the truth was out. When I got home that evening, the house felt different. Colder. Emily and Lucas were watching TV, and Jake was babbling in his playpen, completely unaware of the chaos his existence had brought into our lives. I wanted to scoop him up, hold him tight, and pretend that nothing had changed. But everything had. He wasn't mine. Jessica was in the kitchen, preparing dinner like it was just another normal day. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend. I walked in, my heart racing, and without any preamble, I said her name. Jessica. She turned around, a smile on her face, so fake, so practiced. Hey, babe. How was? I know. Those two words were enough to wipe the smile off her face. Her eyes widened, her body went stiff, and she just stood there, frozen. She didn't ask what I meant. She knew what I meant. I pulled out my phone, opened the email, and shoved it in front of her. Jake isn't mine, I said, my voice trembling with anger, with hurt. Her face went pale. She didn't even try to deny it. She just stared at the screen, then at me, her eyes filling with tears. I can explain, she whispered. Explain. I snapped. Explain how you lied to me for years. How you let me raise a child that wasn't mine. How you cheated on me with Ryan for 5 years and thought I wouldn't find out. She started to cry then, but I didn't care. I had waited too long for this moment, for the truth. I was beyond tears. Beyond sympathy. I'm sorry, she choked out, but it was too late for apologies. I want you out of this house, I said, my voice cold, emotionless. You can pack your things and leave tonight. She tried to plead, to beg, but I didn't hear her. All I could think about was the betrayal, the lies, and the fact that the life I thought I had built with her was a sham. I wasn't even sure what to do next, but I knew I couldn't stand the sight of her anymore. That night, I sat alone in the living room, while Jessica packed her things in silence. The kids were asleep, unaware of the disaster unfolding in their home. As she left, she paused at the door, looking back at me one last time, but I couldn't meet her eyes. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the fallout. But at least the truth was out. After Jessica walked out that night, the silence in the house was suffocating. It was like the air had changed, thick with tension and the weight of everything that had just happened. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing, trying to process what my life had become. Jessica was gone, and with her, the lie we'd been living. But the pain didn't leave with her. The next few days were a blur. I had to tell Emily and Lucas that their mom wouldn't be staying with us for a while, though I couldn't bring myself to tell them why. I didn't want them to think of her as the person who'd betrayed our family. They were too young to understand, too innocent to know that the person they loved had destroyed everything. I kept it vague, saying she needed time away. But even they could sense something was wrong. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. As for Jake, I didn't know what to do. I'd raised him as my own for the past 6 months, and part of me still loved him. How could I not? He was a baby, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding him. But now that I knew he wasn't mine, there was a distance I couldn't shake. Every time I looked at him, all I saw was Ryan. The affair. The lies. It wasn't fair to him, but I couldn't stop the flood of emotions. A week after Jessica left, she started reaching out. At first, it was small stuff, checking on the kids, asking how they were doing. But then the real messages started. She wanted to talk. She wanted to explain. She wanted to come back. Her texts were filled with apologies and excuses. She said she had made a mistake, that the affair with Ryan wasn't what I thought it was. She claimed it had started as a way to cope with the stress of motherhood, that it wasn't meant to hurt me. But how could I believe anything she said now? For 5 years, she'd lied straight to my face, all while continuing to see Ryan. One night, she called, and for some reason, I answered. "Please, let me explain," she said, her voice trembling. "What's left to explain, Jessica?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You cheated. You lied. You let me believe Jake was mine when you knew he wasn't. What more is there to say? It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered. Ryan, it wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't mean for this to happen. Her words felt empty, like she was grasping at straws, trying to make sense of her own betrayal. I let out a long sigh, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I loved you, Jessica. We had a family. And you threw it all away. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, I thought maybe she'd hung up. But then I heard her soft sobs, and I could feel her pain through the phone. I wasn't heartless. I knew she was hurting too. But her pain didn't undo the damage she'd caused. I don't know if we can ever come back from this, I said quietly. I'll do anything, she pleaded. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off all contact with Ryan. Just, please, let me come home. Let's fix this. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could fix it, that we could somehow salvage the life we'd built. But another part of me, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, didn't see how that was possible. I need time, I finally said. I can't just pretend like nothing happened. She cried harder, but I couldn't offer her any comfort. I was barely holding myself together. That night, after I hung up, I sat alone in the darkness, thinking about the future. The life I'd imagined for us was gone, replaced with uncertainty. Jessica was willing to do whatever it took to come back, but the question was, could I ever truly forgive her? Could I raise Jake, knowing he wasn't mine, knowing he was a constant reminder of her betrayal? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same. After that call with Jessica, I realized something, I couldn't keep doing this to myself. Every conversation with her felt like I was reopening a wound that hadn't even begun to heal. No matter how many times she apologized, how much she begged, it wouldn't change what she had done. It wouldn't erase the betrayal or the damage she had caused. I needed to protect myself. But more importantly, I needed to protect our kids. Emily and Lucas didn't fully understand what was going on, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. They knew something was wrong, they just didn't know how bad it really was. And Jake, well, he was too young to know anything, but I wasn't going to let him be caught in the crossfire of Jessica's mess. If I didn't step up now, who knows what kind of psychological harm Jessica could cause them with her lies, her betrayals, her selfishness. I couldn't let that happen. So, I made a decision. A final one. I was done. I filed for divorce the very next morning. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the clearest decision I've made in months. I was done living in a world of lies, done pretending things could ever go back to the way they were. Jessica had shattered everything we had, and there was no way to rebuild from the rubble. The kids needed stability, and that stability wasn't going to come from Jessica. I knew that if I didn't take control of the situation, she'd keep spinning her web of lies, trying to justify her actions and dragging our kids into her mess. I couldn't allow her to twist the truth in front of them, to cause them any more confusion or pain than she already had. Once I filed, I had my lawyer serve her with the papers. No dramatic confrontations, no emotional conversations. Just cold, hard reality. I asked for full custody of the kids. I wasn't going to let her be in their lives if she couldn't even be honest about the most basic things. When Jessica received the divorce papers, she was completely blindsided. She called me non-stop for days. At first, I ignored the calls. Each time I saw her name pop up on my phone, it was like a reminder of all the pain, all the betrayal. I couldn't do it anymore. I blocked her number. But she didn't stop. She started sending emails, texts, voicemails through friends. It didn't matter. I was done, and I wasn't going back. She would write things like, "This isn't what I wanted. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, let's talk. But there was nothing left to talk about. She had 5 years to come clean, and she chose to keep lying. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. Jessica didn't take it well. She couldn't believe I had actually gone through with the divorce. In her mind, I was supposed to take her back, forgive her, let her back into my life. But that wasn't happening. She had already caused enough harm, and I wasn't going to let her drag the kids through any more of her chaos. I spoke to Emily and Lucas about the changes that were coming. I kept it simple. I told them that their mom and I weren't going to live together anymore, but that I would always be there for them, no matter what. They didn't ask many questions, and for that, I was grateful. I wasn't ready to explain the whole truth, not yet. As for Jake, I looked at him and felt a deep sadness. He wasn't mine, biologically, but in a way, he still was. I had raised him since the moment he was born, and none of this was his fault. I didn't know what the future held for him, or for me, but I knew that I had to do what was best for all of us. Jessica tried to contact me for weeks, but every attempt fell flat. She couldn't believe that I had shut her out completely. She sent mutual friends to talk to me, trying to get me to reconsider, but I refused. I didn't need anyone else's opinion. I knew what I had to do to protect my family. I wasn't just cutting ties with Jessica. I was cutting ties with the life we had built on lies. And even though it hurt like hell, I knew it was the only way forward. After I filed for divorce and cut off contact with Jessica, I thought I was done with the lies, the betrayals, and the endless heartache. I had already accepted that our marriage was over, but life has a way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. And this one? It was almost comical. It had been a few weeks since I'd blocked Jessica and moved forward with the divorce. I was trying to get back to some sense of normalcy for the kids and for myself. One of the things I had let slide during all the drama was my own health. So, I decided to go back to the gym. It wasn't the same gym Jessica and I used to go to together, but a new one across town. I just needed a place where I could clear my head and focus on something other than the chaos of the past few months. I showed up at the gym that day, ready for a solid workout. Headphones in, playlist set, I walked straight to the locker room to drop off my bag before hitting the weights. But as I got closer to the showers, something caught my eye, 2 figures moving around behind the frosted glass. I wasn't paying much attention at first, but then I heard her voice. Jessica. I froze for a second, not quite believing what I was hearing. Of course, it was her. And from the low murmurs and laughter, I knew she wasn't alone. The voice that followed? Ryan. Her trainer. I couldn't believe it, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised. I mean, this was Jessica. The woman who had lied to me for years. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but it was different this time. It wasn't the fiery rage I had felt when I first found out about the affair. No, this time, it was almost amusing. I walked up to the shower door, knocked lightly, and said, "Oh, this is just perfect." There was a pause, and then, through the frosted glass, I saw them both freeze. The door creaked open slightly, and Jessica's face peeked out, her eyes wide with shock. Her hair was wet, her skin flushed, and Ryan was behind her, awkwardly trying to hide. Seriously? I said, raising an eyebrow. In the gym showers? Really? Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She didn't know what to say. But I wasn't interested in her excuses this time. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, I continued, my tone calm. Honestly, this is exactly what I expected from you. She blinked, still processing what was happening. I didn't. I cut her off with a wave of my hand. Save it, Jessica. Whatever you're about to say, it doesn't matter. We're already done. This just confirms everything I've been feeling for months. I could see the embarrassment and panic rising in her eyes. She was turning red, completely thrown off by my calmness. I wasn't yelling, wasn't angry, just, done. What I did. I said, looking her dead in the eye. Not a mistake. Filing for divorce, cutting you out. Best decision I've ever made. I'm good, Jessica. Really, I am. Then, without waiting for a response, I turned around and walked out. I didn't storm off in a rage or feel like the world was crumbling around me like I had the first time I caught her. No, this time, I just grabbed my bag, walked to the treadmill, and started my workout. Behind me, I heard the shower door slam open, and Jessica stumbled out, still dripping wet, her face beet red. She hurried past the gym floor, trying to avoid any stares, while Ryan fumbled behind her. I couldn't help but laugh to myself as she practically ran out of the building, mortified. As I settled into my run, I felt lighter. Seeing her like that, scrambling to explain herself, trying to maintain some shred of dignity after being caught red-handed again, it was almost freeing. I wasn't the broken man she had once hurt. I was moving on, stronger than ever. She could keep lying, keep sneaking around, but none of it mattered anymore. I was done. It had been a few weeks since that embarrassing scene at the gym, and honestly, I thought I was finally closing the chapter on Jessica. I'd seen her for who she really was, again, and I was moving on. I felt stronger every day, focused on my kids and getting my life back on track. But, of course, life wasn't done with its surprises. Not yet. One morning, while I was making breakfast for the kids, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have bothered checking, but something made me glance at it. It was from Jessica. We need to talk. It's important. Please, just hear me out. I almost deleted it. I mean, what else could she possibly have to say? But curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her that afternoon at a coffee shop. Not at the house, not anywhere near the kids, just a neutral place where we could talk and, hopefully, I could put an end to whatever this latest drama was. When I walked into the cafe, I spotted her right away. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her hands, eyes darting around the room like she was about to break down. Gone was the confident, self-assured woman I'd known for so long. She looked desperate. I sat down, keeping my distance. What's this about, Jessica? She didn't waste any time. Her voice was shaky, her eyes wide with fear. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but this time, I didn't react the way I might have before. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. Let me guess, it's Ryan's. She nodded, biting her lip, clearly waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at her, feeling a mix of disgust and pity. I'd already been through this roller coaster. Another lie, another betrayal. It didn't faze me anymore. So, what do you want from me? I asked, my voice calm. Congratulations. Sympathy. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a second, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. It's not like that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan, he doesn't want anything to do with me. Or the baby. I raised an eyebrow. Really? I'm shocked. She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. You don't understand. He told me, he doesn't want to build a life with someone like me. He said he's seen how I treated you, how I lied for years, and he doesn't trust me. There it was. The ultimate irony. The man she'd risked everything for, the man who was supposed to be her escape from our marriage, didn't want her. He'd been watching her all along, seeing the same person I'd seen, the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. And now that she was pregnant with his child, he was backing out. He told me it was just an affair to him, she continued, her voice breaking. The baby doesn't mean anything to him. Neither does Jake, or this one. I sat there, letting her words sink in. Ryan had used her, just like she'd used me. He wasn't interested in being a father, in raising a child, or in dealing with the wreckage of Jessica's life. To him, it had all been fun and games until the consequences caught up with them both. I should have felt satisfaction, maybe even vindication, but all I felt was exhaustion. So, now what? I asked, my voice flat. I don't know, she whispered, staring down at her hands. I don't know what to do. I thought he loved me. I thought we could be together. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy and pathetic. She had thrown away everything, our marriage, our family, her integrity, for a man who didn't even care about her. You're panicking, I said, leaning forward. And for what? This is what you wanted, right? You chose this, Jessica. Tears streamed down her face now. I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm sure you didn't, I said coldly. But here we are. And now you have 2 kids you didn't want and a man who wants nothing to do with you. So, tell me, why are you here, Jessica? What do you expect me to do about it? She stared at me, completely lost, as if the weight of her choices had finally come crashing down on her. I don't know what to do. I sighed, standing up. That's not my problem anymore. You made your bed, Jessica. Now you've got to lie in it. As I turned to walk out, leaving her sitting there, broken and terrified, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not satisfaction, not victory, just the realization that this chapter was over. She was no longer my problem. Her choices had caught up with her, and now she had to deal with the fallout. I had my kids to think about, my life to rebuild. And from this point on, that was my only focus. It's been months since that last conversation with Jessica in the cafe. The memory of her sitting there, broken and lost, is now nothing more than a faint echo. After that day, I didn't hear from her again. No more texts, no calls, no desperate emails trying to claw her way back into my life. It was like she vanished, taking all the chaos and destruction with her. And honestly, I was okay with that. I focused on my kids, on rebuilding our lives, on finding stability again. Emily and Lucas have adjusted well. They still ask about their mom sometimes, but I've kept my answers simple, making sure they feel loved and secure. As for Jake, I've come to terms with the fact that, even though he's not biologically mine, he's still my son in every way that matters. I'm his dad, and I always will be. Life has slowly returned to normal. I've been focusing on work, spending time with the kids, and finding peace in the routines that were once shattered by Jessica's betrayal. The weight that once hung over me, the lies, the hurt, the constant questioning, is gone. I'm lighter now, more at peace than I've been in years. I didn't just survive this, I came out stronger. There were dark moments, sure. Moments when I doubted everything, when the pain of betrayal felt like it would never end. But I made it through. And now, I wake up every day with a sense of purpose, a sense of clarity. My kids are thriving, and so am I. I'm not looking back anymore, and I'm not waiting for the next disaster. As for Jessica, I don't know where she is or what's become of her. And, frankly, I don't care. Her choices were her own, and she's living with the consequences of them. She's no longer a part of my story, no longer a weight around my neck, dragging me down. I've learned a lot through all of this, about trust, about resilience, and about myself. The biggest lesson? Sometimes, letting go is the only way to move forward. And that's exactly what I've done. I'm good now. My family is good. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the end of that chapter. For anyone listening to this who might be going through something similar, know this, you can get through it. It hurts, it's messy, and it feels like the world is ending, but there's life on the other side. You just have to keep moving forward. Thanks for listening. End.